sounds familiar. Trump going on a Twitter tirade slamming our allies in not just Mexico, but Australia. Is he trying to just fire up the base, or is there a coherent strategy somewhere there? Then, how should Democrats react to the new president? Should they go along to get along or try and block every piece of the agenda? Then, Groundhog Day in Washington. We're going to show you how the president does the same thing over and over again and play you some highlights, or should I say lowlights, of, believe it or not, just the first 2 weeks. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you so much for joining us this Thursday night. Well, President Trump focusing on foreign policy, and here is how he described a phone call that he had with the Prime Minister of Australia.
It's time we're going to be a little tough, folks. We're taken advantage of by every nation in the world virtually. We're going to straighten it out. Believe me, when you hear about the tough phone calls I'm having, don't worry about it.
Now, that's Australia, okay? Not Iran or North Korea. Australia, one of America's most loyal allies. So what's Trump upset about? Well, it's a deal that was made before he came into office. Now, here is, of course, the tweet from the Donald. Do you believe it? The Obama administration agreed to take thousands of illegal immigrants from Australia. Why? I will study this dumb deal. Then there's the president's phone call with Mexican President Enrique Nieto. AP says President Trump was trying to really smooth things over and said he was willing to send U.S. troops to stop the, quote, bad hombres down there, and that's his exact phrasing, if Mexico can't control them. Now, those two countries are supposed to be friends. Iran, a different story. Yesterday, National Security Advisor Michael Flynn had the following to say about Iran.
Iran is now feeling emboldened. As of today, we are officially putting Iran on notice.
Now, nobody ever clarified exactly what on notice means, but Flynn's boss, the president, he, of course, went 1 or 2 or 3, however many steps further today.
President, military action off the table in Iran?
Nothing's, honestly, nothing is off the table. I haven't eased anything.
Nothing. Plus, multiple reports saying the Trump administration is going to put additional sanctions on Iran and announce it as early as tomorrow. Let's bring in our panel right now. Richard Brodsky, former Democratic New York State Assembly, now senior fellow at Demos and a professor at NYU. Dominic Carter, political journalist and author. Bill O'Reilly, the good one, a former Republican strategist, now a member of the Conservative Party. And Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. And I left out, by the way, that, well, there's more sanctions on Iran. He's easing some sanctions on Russia, even though I've heard from everybody, including his administration, that they wouldn't do that, but that apparently has begun already today. Okay. I get it if you want to talk tough with the North Koreans. I get it if you want to go after even Iran.
Watch this.
But Australia?
Watch this. Dominic, I put you on official notice. Okay?
Double secret probation notice. Yeah.
What is it? Does that work? How do you feel?
You don't want to know.
It's hard to make academic, literal, and intellectual sense out of this. This is attitudinizing and changing the narrative. Now, maybe the narrative could change, but the problem is that behind the veneer is more veneer, and you can't just do the attitudinal stuff without having an intelligence and a competence behind it. And if the rollout of the refugee executive order is any indicator, they don't have the competence to do what they want, assuming we even agreed to what they want was the right thing.
Businessman, you finally got
to negotiate.
Andrew, though, we joke around, but there is a consequence to this. None of the people at home are going, oh, who cares? You tweak Iran, big deal. Australia, what are they going to do? Not give us koalas? But there's a point to this, which is, look at Mexico, perfect example. The premise of the phone call was they were trying to smooth things over with Mexico because the president is even acknowledging the wall, if there ever will be a wall, will not be paid by the Mexicans. Then somebody explained to him, we actually trade a lot with these people, and it's going to impact us as well. When he says hombres, Nieto is an extremely vulnerable president of Mexico. Popularity ratings at one point in the single digits. But every time he stands up to Trump, his poll numbers go up. For political livelihood, he can't do anything with Trump given the box that Trump's put him in. The same thing with Australia right now. Prime Minister over there, he fires back at Trump, and now he's being praised a hero back home. And you can multiply this with other countries around. And even ones that haven't been insulted yet, and I use that word strongly, they're going to look to other people to fill the void here. This is not in the national self-interest to do this. It's not that I don't like Trump. It's that it doesn't help the country. And I don't.
Even whether you're talking about trade or whether you're talking about military policy, Australia is one of our most staunch allies. I mean, they went to Afghanistan with us. They went to Iraq with us. They continue to be in Afghanistan with us. And the only world leader that I know of who really firmly pushed back until the other day was Angela Merkel in Germany, who's also up for re-election this year. So, yeah, it almost guarantees the adversarial relationship that Trump seems to be seeking, because you're going to encourage the leaders of other countries to take a harder line stance with the United States so that Trump can turn around and say, look, I told you I was going to bully these people. I wasn't going to, be a willow like previous presidents have been. And so it sets up the whole, the image that Trump is looking for.
It sounds silly, Bill, but in one of his first press conferences, Spicer tried to put to rest that the president was just tweeting on his own, lonely up in bed at night because he couldn't sleep. I don't know. Maybe Bannon's egging him on. I mean, we do these things like it's a bad, scandal episode or whatever, right? But nobody could have told him to say bad hombres when the premise of the call was to try and smooth things over with Mexico. Nobody could have told him on what was usually a pro forma call with Australia to start a fight with them. And by the way, they're not immigrants. They were refugees that were agreed to and they were vetted. But why let facts get in the way of it? My point is, on a different level, obviously, you've dealt with electeds or people running where there is message control. Do you think that people are just getting in his ear and the last voice says, go ahead, do it? Or do you think he just can't stay on point?
I think maybe both. I mean, their victories are clear victories that Trump can have early on. He could have, if he had rolled out the executive order, he would have won that politically. Maybe he did anyway. But there were enough people that would agree with restrictions.
Well, how about the Supreme Court pick? He had the afterglow of it, and he totally took the attention away from it to talk about whatever the latest thing, and now Australia and everything else. He can't even enjoy a news cycle where it's on his own terms.
Yeah, he just seems to need to generate news. He just needs to poke, and that was always the concern for a lot of us, was that when you go overseas and start poking, what happens? Because you can get in a situation very quickly with Iran, where you get into a firing situation where they're running speedboats by and being jerks to our ships. Is this his line in the sand, and then is it a shooting situation? And that can escalate really, really fast.
Tom, do polls matter to him? Because sometimes he dismisses them, sometimes he listens. We can't bring him up, but Gallup has showed that he's underwater on a whole bunch of polls. But if he goes out, and there it is, thanks guys, in terms of, look at the travel ban, right? He claims the base is with him. Now, as more numbers come in and people put faces to this, they don't like it. The same thing with the refugee program. That wall, we're getting to territory where it's almost 2-1. So my point is, listen, he doesn't seem to be in a bubble where he doesn't know what's being said about him. He seems to know everything that's said about him negatively. But at the same point, it's like he needs the crowds for glucose. He needs the base to ramp him up. Is it that he believes listen, the election proved anything. All I need is my base. I don't need anybody else. Or at some point, does he look at the polls and say, I have a problem?
If you are expecting for President Trump to ever look at a single poll and go, oh my God, I have a problem, I hope you don't hold your breath, because that's never, ever going to happen. His ego does not permit for that. Some comments that were made, very, very good. Mr. Brodsky.
Don't encourage
Professor
him.
Brodsky.
Professor
Oh,
Brodsky.
God almighty.
Use the word competence. I will flip and say incompetence. Let's call it what it is. There's no competence in the White House. There's no method to the madness. He does what he wants to do.
Are you
Period.
sure he doesn't look at the polls? I think he looks at them all the time, but he pretends he doesn't.
When one of the conversations I had with him, the first thing he said was, he says, Dominic, did you see this poll? My numbers, and he knew his exact numbers in every single category. But something that Bill said is very important, Richard, when he said generating news. I want you to think about this for a second. Now, I'm speaking as a private citizen right now because this crosses the line as a journalist. I'm like, are we going to wake up from this nightmare, this 3-month nightmare? Is this all a bad joke where Dominic is asleep and maybe, because it's got to give. But what Bill said, he pointed to generating news, Richard, right? Think about this for a second. We have a president that's so into loving himself that he talks every day for the cameras. He can't shut up. Now, you got to remember, it's totally what he wants to say because it's before the cameras are kicked out, before the meeting starts. But he's talking. Think about this. What other president you know? Please answer this. What other president talks every single day before the cameras? Name one.
Another president?
Every single day.
President of Colombia in 1936. Look,
That's good.
th-
That's
th-
good.
there's-
You're on
there's-
fire
Fine
tonight.
man who could wear a
There's-
fedora. Yeah.
you can make the case that the attitudinal stuff Trump is doing is resetting expectations and tables.
No, you're
Wait a
giving him
minute.
too much credit.
No.
You really are.
It's doing it. People are uncertain. They don't know what the United States wants. They don't know what they'll have to do. The Iranians apparently are sort of pulling back to trying to check things out.
Right now.
The problem here
What
is
happens with a thug and a bully?
that-
Eventually, they run into another bully,
Here's
and it doesn't
what
end well.
you said that I said we are in agreement on. If he had competence behind the outbursts, you could go maybe. The problem is that you have just the outbursts, and then you have more outbursts.
Now, we're going to talk in the next segment about where Democrats, because Chuck Schumer, my God, he's got a tough job on himself, both the math, the calendar, and some of the issues and his base. But also, Bill, Republicans, I know they got an agenda. I know they want their court picks. I know they want taxes repealed. I know they want a bunch of things. But the longer that they're quiet on this and the more that they go along to get along with this guy, doing things that are antithetical to conservative principles, they're going to get tarred with it too. It's got to be this amazing calculation as to how much longer can we just sit back and let them do this. Forget about just for the Republic, until we want our stuff, we want them to do it, but at a certain point here, are we going to get stuck with this baggage too? I mean, now think about that on the Republican side, and when we come back, how about on the Democratic side? President Trump, he's going full speed ahead on just about everything. So here's the choice for Democrats and the man on your screen there, Chuck Schumer. Should they raise pitchforks and fight on every issue or work with him and risk angering their own base? Stay with us, everybody.